All right, guys, we're so glad to have Greg back with us. Um, Nick, as you know, Greg is an expert in this field that can really help answer this question, especially leading up to the Thanksgiving and holiday season. So, Greg, one thing that a lot of traders deal with, but I think everybody deals with, is even though it's the time of the holiday, we kind of have a feeling of stress that comes on us because of the holidays, right? And maybe you can kind of help us and give us a couple pointers on how we can deal with that stress when it comes to work, family, and trading.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And you kind of nailed it. Yeah, we change our entire experience of life based on the calendar. So now that it's the holidays, we're supposed to be happy, joyous, generous. We're supposed to want to get together with our families and be happy, right? So it's like probably it is the only time of year where there is an expectation for how I am supposed to be, which is not really it's not really in line with reality. And reality is it doesn't really matter what day it is. People's happiness levels are subjective. They are related to how we're experiencing and interpreting the world around us, and how well we're integrating that, how well we're processing that, how well we're taking care of ourselves. But during the holidays, the ante kind of gets raised, and what the sort of the myth about getting together like during Thanksgiving. So you're supposed to get together with your family, and you're supposed to be grateful, right? And if you're not, then somehow or other, like you need to go sit in the corner over there because you're not playing along. But in reality, for most people, getting together with family is one of the most stressful experiences that we have, because family is it's an integrated whole dynamic. It's a complex system that has its own personality. It has its own character. And it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle, and everybody is in a shape, and they have to stay in that shape. And when you get out of the house and you start to evolve and individuate and become the person that you are in the world, maybe you even surround yourself with other people that are more supportive and acknowledging, validating for who you really are. When you go back and you get together with your family, oftentimes family kind of insists that you fit back into the shape that they had you in when you were a child, and all of the dynamics that exist between siblings and parents, and all of the triangles and the dyads and the alliances and the feuds. All of those things rise to the surface when you get together with your family. And so that gives rise to a tremendous amount of stress for most people. Complicating that is that it is also a time where we are, almost by default, we are forced to spend money that we may not have budgeted for, or we may not even really be able to allocate without a real sacrifice. And it could be, money just putting together a meal, a party. It could be travel. It could involve a lot of sacrifices and compromises. You have to put your life on hold so that you can go do these things. And so there's a sort of sense of pressure in a lot of families to stretch yourself beyond where you are comfortable. And we don't really have a lot of um, I don't know if there's a lot of real support or even modeling in our culture to be able to say like, hey, look, this year, like I'm working on something and it's really hard for me to get away, and it's hard for me to allocate anything extra. So, how about if I just give you a call and say hi? In a lot of families, that breaks traditions. And so there's additional stress that's put on just based on not being able to fulfill certain expectations that we, or not being able or willing to carry on family traditions that could be going on for generations, but it doesn't really doesn't fit the person that you are today. So this is one time of year where I think people experience the most stress and give themselves the least amount of space and freedom to actually honor that stress, right? So let's just talk about what stress really is. Stress is physical. It is the body's reaction to a narrative or a story or a perception that we hold in our mind. So if the story is, despite everything that's going on in my life, I don't feel grateful right now, or I'm not particularly happy right now, or I would much rather not be coming and spending a whole day with my family. Or like when I am with my family, I feel small and unseen, and that's uncomfortable for me, and I would rather not. Or maybe Uncle Johnny is going to get drunk, and I know he's going to get drunk, and I don't like my kids to have to see that. Or my parents are fighting and at each other all of the time, and I don't want to be exposed to that. There's all sorts of things that the mind, starts drumming up, and in resistance to that, the body gets tight. We start to clench a little bit. We start to breathe shallow. We start to move a little bit into that fight flight reflex that happens when we're breathing shallow, and the heart starts to beat faster, and the nervous system sends a signal to the most primitive part of the brain that says, you are in crisis. You need to run, or you need to fight, or you need to faint, or you need to freeze. Because ultimately, that base primitive part of the brain is mostly interested in our survival. And whether it's an adaptive mechanism or not, ultimately, all the organism of the human brain and body is doing is trying to get us to survive. Okay. And so stress is a way of sort of reacting to a perceived threat. And that threat may be having to go home and sit at the table with your family once a year, or it may, be a fear that I'm going to be judged because I'm not as lucrative this year as maybe my brother or something. And so the body reacts to that, and we experience that as stress, anxiety. In the old texts, psychiatrists, medical practitioners referred to anxiety as tremors, because the body is shaking a little bit. So this is a good clue as to what to do and how to manage that stress. As we're moving towards the holidays, it's really crucial that people take better care of their bodies, and even to the extent of, I would say, two things. One, watch your sleep. Sleep schedule is vastly underrated. Most people don't recognize how utterly important it is to give the body and the brain sufficient sleep. You need to get good, solid sleep. Try to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day, and do whatever you can to ease yourself into that routine, because a poor sleep will impact physical, emotional, and mental health the following day. And once you're in that following day, then it's optimal that you do something to force yourself to breathe a little bit heavier than you normally do. Because what heavy breathing will do is it'll force the lungs to expand. As the lungs expand, the nervous system is triggered. There's a response, it's called the Herring-Brewer reflex. Herring-Brewer reflex is when the certain, like a trigger point is pressed in the lungs, sends a signal through the nervous system to the brain that basically says, relax, man, everything's okay. I'm not in crisis. I'm okay. I can breathe. And so it's actually impossible to be stressed if you are breathing deeply. And most people in today's world are moving so fast that it's very difficult for people to breathe deeply unless you force yourself to do that. So it's a good way to do that. Go for a run. If you can't run, at least take a 20-minute walk. If you can't get a 20-minute walk, take a 10-minute walk in the middle of the day. Go outside, take a walk around the block. Get on a treadmill. You don't have to kill yourself, really. You just have to force yourself to breathe a little deeply, deeper than usual. And that has a great effect at sort of, minimizing the amount of stress that we're carrying in our bodies, because not only is the body carrying the stress from today, it's accumulative. And so it usually begins around now, right? And it carries through Thanksgiving, then it carries through Christmas, then you've got New Year's Eve. And what most people are doing during this period of time is they're overeating and they're over drinking, which disrupts sleep. It dysregulates the metabolism. It dysregulates all of the body systems, dysregulates emotions. It increases reactivity, which increases the chance of conflicts with people. And then you got a bunch of people sitting around getting drunk, fighting with each other.
Right. Greg, I had a couple of things that I wanted to run by you.
Yeah.
That I thought would be great to hear your input on some things that I've done or am considering doing in this coming season. So the first one that I've done actually for a while now is gifts. I know we're a little early for that, but it's good to start planning ahead.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of my friends and family, they pretty much have everything they want and need. So, you kind of put yourself in the situation that you have to, like, every year get them something better or spend so much time to try to find something that they don't have or whatever they want. So what I started doing several years ago was doing gives like on their behalf. So donating a goat to a community in a different country in their name.
That's
and,
nice.
and what I would do is I would buy them a little goat, like a little toy goat, give them that with a card saying, hey, this village or this family has a goat because of you. So something like that idea, or donating to a charity, but that's kind of what I've been doing for gifts. So I wanted to hear your input on that one.
I love that. I love that, but I think the main thing that I want to take from that is that the creativity, Chris, that you engaged in order to be able to come up with this solution for yourself. I think that is the gift that we give ourselves, and it's an opportunity to do that right now as we approach Christmas, where um, people are stressed about gifts and how they handle gifts and how much they allocate for it. But if you can give yourself permission to be creative and come up with another way to do it that feels good to you, then I think you're in the right spirit. It's the spirit of giving and the spirit of generosity. And I think that an empowered human being makes those choices for himself.
Okay.
And doesn't sort of remain a prisoner to the family pattern.
Right.
That's been going on for years and years and years about how we do presents.
Right.
So yeah, but that demonstrates a certain level of emotional freedom, and if a person doesn't feel like they have that freedom, might be an invitation to experiment with doing it and seeing how that feels. I think being honest with people in your family and actually addressing that openly, having an actual conversation like, hey, listen, this year I think I want to do presents like this. Okay. And not even ask, is that okay with you? But make the decision that that's what you're going to do, and offer that. I think that is a step into empowerment.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that feedback.
Yeah.
My other point that you touched on, and I just want to give you what I do, and maybe you can hit on this and say hey, that's not good or that's good, is conversations. My family, I personally love politics, but I know not everybody does. In the spirit of the holidays, I try to. We want to try to keep it clean, right? So I have a list of things to talk about. To when I go into a family dinner or a family event, I already have a list in my head of things that I'm willing to cover or ready to cover in case the conversation turns a different way. And I bring it back to what I want to talk about, what I feel like will be, you know, peaceful to talk about, if that makes sense. Or if
Yeah.
somebody asks me something about something I don't want to talk about, for example, that's my other part is, hey, how's trading? Well, I don't want to maybe talk to you about trading. So I already have a backup list of things to kind of change the topic on. So I wanted to hear your input on that part.
Yeah, my take on that is an elite way of managing your way through difficult scenarios, like the annual dinner with the family for the holidays. If there's, and I don't know if most people think like this, but if you have an important meeting coming up at work, you are not going to go to that meeting unprepared. You're going to prepare. You're going to cover all of your bases. You're going to review what could go wrong and what this person may ask and how am I going to respond to that challenge, and then you mentally rehearse that. And whether you're a professional world-class athlete or you're an executive, in any environment, if you want to be successful, you mentally rehearse and prepare for the engagement. And yet, when most people go home to see their families, they don't do that at all. They fret. Oh, I got to see this guy and I got to see that guy. And, I don't know how I'm going to get through it. Right. And then, that's when the drinking starts, or that's where the acting out starts. But if people were to recognize that this is worth prepping for, right? And showing up prepared to manage tension and rivalries and old stuff, and also to become mindful of what gets triggered. You know, maybe I have a brother who constantly makes me the butt of his jokes, right? And I'm going to be prepared for that when I go home. Or maybe I tend to get drowned out and I become invisible, right? How does that affect me emotionally, and how can I express that or manage that in a way that feels good to me? So thinking in advance, being prepared, and then going in ready to execute that, and having an exit strategy also in your pocket, that if you feel like you're becoming overwhelmed, rather than waiting for it to turn into a blow up, and every family has this, there's at least one family gathering where there's been a blow up, and then and then everybody left all angry, mad, and sad at each other. Uh, have an exit strategy and go, you know what, listen, I got another thing going on at 5 o'clock, so I can only stay for a couple of hours, right? Bang. Now you have demonstrated self-love because you are setting boundaries for yourself that are good for you. So don't try to take on more than you can manage. If you can only do an hour and a half with your family, do an hour and a half with your family and be graceful about it, and not wait for a fight to happen to give you an excuse to run out of the house, right?
Right.
So I love your approach. I think it's a very mature approach to dealing with that, Chris.
Okay. Perfect. And last one, if I may.
Yeah.
And this one is probably the most challenging one, and it comes to tradition. While I do respect and like certain traditions, I personally, like, to start my own traditions, right? You have your own
Yeah.
family, your own life. And so, how do you? My family, we're not too big on tradition, so thankfully, personally, I've been okay with that. But I've heard from so many friends of mine that say, we have a tradition that we go to a church service, or we do this, or
Yeah.
we do this
Yeah.
event. And while
Yeah.
that's all okay, they want to start their own family tradition.
Yeah.
How would you help them kind of, navigate that?
Yeah, you're right. It is a complicated question because the answer depends on many variables. In certain cultures, these family traditions are the glue that keeps the family together. And so, if you come from South, let's say Nick, a South American, and now maybe you've moved to the United States, and your parents and all of your relatives are still trying to maintain the family traditions to keep the culture alive. And one of the kids is like, you know, I want to develop some different traditions that don't have anything to do with the family. That could be seen as a betrayal, you know, or it could be perceived as turning your back on your family or turning your back on your culture. That could be very hurtful to parents, first generation immigrants. Uh, you know, and that's always where it's tough. It's the roughest terrain to travel is sort of that first or second generation American, where they're beginning to break away or maybe let go a little bit of some of the family traditions. Um, and what I have found in my work with immigrants, um, mostly from the Caribbean and Latin America. Um, that first generation of American kids, or even first couple of generations after migrating to this country, it's really hard for them to even consider hurting their mother's feelings by not coming home and engaging in the family tradition, right? And so, it's a little bit easier if you're talking to somebody who's they've been in this country for, several generations, and everyone is already doing exactly that. As soon as you get married, you start having your own kids, you start developing your own traditions, and everybody accepts that, you know. So it's really different depending on who you're talking to, and I just think that we have to be gentle with ourselves during this time of year, because those are the kind of issues that come to the surface, and none of them are easy. And you've got to be gentle with yourself, particularly if you are trying to do exactly that. You got one foot in one world and one foot in another, and you're trying to honor both of those worlds. You're trying to be honoring, and you don't want to be disrespecting your parents and the traditions that they have carried here for holidays, and it's important to them, and your relationship with them is important to you, and yet you also want to create some of your own. These are hard places to be, and the holidays give us an opportunity to really explore how we want to negotiate those things as we carve out new identities. And so it's hard. You've got to be patient and gentle with yourself, and patient and gentle with your family as well, because they're also going through that same thing with various different levels of insight about it.
Perfect. Well,
I was gonna ask to Greg, why, let's say, because you discussed what would be the approach. You go to a family that has all these traditions, right? But let's say that I'm going to a family that has zero traditions. It's everything is kind of chaos. Like it's nothing. It's organized. You know, you're not. You know, you're not gonna interrupt anything because there's nothing. So
Yeah.
everything that you go to is gonna be pretty much a surprise. How can you prepare
Yeah.
in a situation like that if you have zero idea what to expect?
Well, that's different for, some people are great in those situations, right? Because they're just kind of free spirits, and, they're curious and they're open and they go with the flow. But then if you're a person that feels more secure in with a more structure where you can actually count on what's going to happen, then that kind of situation would be more challenging for you. And it goes back to, I think, what Chris was talking about, about mentally preparing yourself before you get there, right? And also emotionally preparing yourself as well. Um, Before going into an environment like that, you really, if you've got to get yourself into a state of um, if not enthusiasm, at least a state of curiosity about, like, hey, what's this going to be like, you know, and then use that time to notice how people are either uh, connecting with each other or disconnecting with each other in that environment. Um, so it could become a very interesting experiment for you. But if you're an individual that really is used to the structure and the rituals and sort of, these social guidelines that support us in moving through events like a holiday, um, if you are used to that and you require that, and then you're going to somebody's house where all they're doing is turning on the football game and breaking out the beer, and everybody's just shooting the breeze and it's spontaneous, and you can only handle an hour of that, be ready before you get there to announce, hey, I got to leave at 3 o'clock. I hope you don't mind. I got this other thing I have to go to, but I'm really excited about getting to spend this hour with you. You know, so that goes back to, so like, really being gentle with yourself and knowing what you can handle. Um, and it's different every year too. It's, I wouldn't say that it's the same every year. There are certain years where I just let my family know, not this year. This is my boundary. I can't do this year with you guys. I choose not to do this year with you guys. But I'll give you a call. I'll be happy to, check in with you for maybe a 20-minute Skype. Um, that's another thing that would be good to address. Family Skypes or Zooms. That got really popular during COVID, and a lot of holidays and special events were done over Zoom. And that's very disorienting to people that are used to organic gatherings that are really reliant on people bouncing off of each other. You're picking up all sorts of different cues, and so everything kind of knits together. But then when you get on a Zoom and all you see is people's faces in the boxes, you can't actually put it all together there, because you don't know what this reaction is about. You don't know if people are actually connecting with each other. And it often takes about 10 or 20 minutes just to get into a rhythm. It took me a while before I realized I can't stand those kinds of family meetings. And so I now set boundaries around them. I'm just going to check in just to say hello, and then I'm out of here. 10 minutes. Okay. And nobody's giving me any trouble about it, right? Because I think that, deep inside, everybody else is thinking, I wish I could do that too. So we're learning as we go along. And every year you have to really assess what's right for you that year and be okay with it. Give yourself permission to do that. And, it's not really loving to your family to punish yourself and sacrifice. That's just choosing to be a martyr. And, that adds to the stress of the holidays. And so I really encourage people to use the holidays as an opportunity to practice self-love.
Yeah, what you mentioned, having the opportunity or even, the ability to just say, hey, 10 minutes and that's it, and everybody is saying, oh, he's so lucky he can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, yeah, you're overwhelmed with the situation, and in a person to person situation, you can just go to the bathroom, leave,
That's right.
go upstairs, whatever. But here, you're 24/7 on the little square, watching your
Yes.
face react. So
Yes.
it's
Nobody does that in, when you're live, if you get together for a family gathering, and, let's say that gathering goes on for 5 or 6 hours, most people are taking breaks. Like you say, they're going to the bathroom, they're going or stepping outside, they're maybe taking a nap. Uh, you know, family gatherings are very rarely everybody is in each other's face around that table, right? For more than just dinner. And so it's a whole different thing that really challenges us to find a whole new way of interacting and relating with each other. And I think that you've got to give yourself a break and just know what you can handle, and then claim that. And without that, and that takes a level of emotional maturity. And so without that level of emotional maturity, what people will end up doing is getting drunk or overindulging to the point where they're numb and then needing to crash or zone out or something like that. Um, or waiting for some interaction to happen where they blow up at each other and now they have an excuse to leave. And you can mitigate all of that just by setting it up before you get there. Like, I'm going to stay for about 2 hours and I got to get going. I got another thing I got to do. I'm really sorry, but I really wanted to spend some time with you. So let's do this. And then you get out of there in 2 hours. And don't be passive and allow the situation to disintegrate to give yourself an excuse to leave. That's just bad planning. That's just a sign of a person who didn't plan. And and now what you're doing is you are acting exactly the way they expect you to act when they have you in that little spot in the jigsaw puzzle. And that's what happens. Oftentimes family members come back together and they take their spot. They shrink back into the place they were in when they were 7 or 8 years old. And here you got people that are 45 years old and maybe they have their own children, they're accomplished in their lives. And then you go home and your father talks to you in a certain way and your sibling talks to you in a certain way, and bang, you feel like you're that little kid again, playing that role that you grew out of already, and you have not chosen that for yourself, and here you are in that spot all over again. And that's why so many family gatherings end up blowing up. People get drunk or they get, overindulged, and they are losing their capacity to mind their temper, and bite their tongue, and then they just blow up at each other. And then what do you have? You got a bunch of 45-year-olds bickering with each other like they were a bunch of little kids around the table 20, 30 years ago. All right? That's what happens.
Yeah, that is so true. As soon as you meet someone from your past, I just go immediately to that, what I was
Yeah.
back in that time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will resonate with that because it's a common experience, I believe.
Very common. Very common, and and it's distressing, and it's the reason why people decide, to write each other off or to block each other. Um, I don't do social media with any of my family. I mean, I have a few of them, that we're on, we've befriended each other, but I don't interact and engage with any of my family on social media, because family oftentimes cannot afford to see each other for who they've become in the world. They can only see you in the the space that you occupied when you were 8 years old, because they occupied a space in relationship to you at 8 years old. So if they see you growing and changing into an autonomous human being, that challenges them to have to grow and change into an autonomous human being. And we might not even know each other. And quite often, when family members get together at these holidays, they actually don't know each other as people. And, if the family is, very intact and it's healthy, where people can sit around and actually be curious, and give each other space to express who they are, that's unusual. Most families are not like that. I work with people for a living. Almost every family has a boatload of trauma that has been rolling down the generations for, hundreds of years. And it just gets passed from one generation to the next. Most families are not so intact that everybody is supportive of each other and curious about each other's growth and really wants to be each other's cheerleaders. It doesn't happen like that. You have to find that in your friends. You have to cultivate those relationships outside of your family. I think that family is the launching pad. We sort of like we get our trauma and our wounds from our family, and we use that to launch into the world. And I think that you as you grow, maybe you can like come to a place where you're not blaming them anymore, and you're not holding them responsible for your problems anymore. You just sort of have compassion for the fact that you all came from a similar cauldron of trauma. That's true, and that is the truth for most families. And then Thanksgiving and Christmas rolls around, and you're supposed to forget all of that and go home, and everybody's supposed to love each other and hug each other and have a great time with each other. That's not really realistic. That's not being true to what is actually happening in the present moment. That's just carrying out a myth. That's following a narrative, a cultural narrative that this is what we do. We're grateful and we're happy to be with each other.
That's a good point, Greg. Thank you so much, Greg, for your insight. And there's an old saying in the old book. It says, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown, among his relatives and his own home." So that's quite accurate. So thank you, Greg, so much. We appreciate it. And guys, thank you for listening. On behalf of everyone here at Leeloo, and Greg, myself, and Nick, you guys have a great day.
Thank you so much.